Dinner had only just begun when my brother leaned back in his chair, tapped his fork against his plate, and said, "Not everyone here deserves to be a Mercer." His voice rolled across the table like a challenge he already knew he would win. My mother nodded before the sound even faded. My father lowered his gaze to his water glass, turning it slowly between his fingers. I felt the words press into me, sharp and familiar, the kind of wound that does not bleed but still burns. Colton smirked. "Some people just take up space." He added quietly enough to sound casual, loudly enough for every cousin to hear. I tried to steady my breath. The room did not tilt, but something inside me did. I kept my eyes on the edge of my plate, counting the seconds until the moment passed, until my body stopped reacting like it always had, as if I were the one who needed to shrink. At the far end of the table, Grandpa Jameson lifted his head. He did not speak. He only watched us with a stillness that made Colton straighten in his seat. No one else said a word. This is the story of how everything shifted that night. If parts of it sound familiar to your own life, stay with me. I think you will understand why I kept listening even when it hurt. At work, people listened when I spoke. My team asked for my judgment, trusted my decisions, and thanked me for keeping projects from falling apart. But the moment I stepped into my parents' home, those same qualities turned invisible, as if calm meant weak and steady meant small. Colton liked reminding me of that. "You always pick the safest route," he said once, right after boasting about a partnership he had barely helped close. "Leadership needs risk. You would not understand." Elena echoed him without hesitation. "Your brother was born with presence." She told me. "You were born thoughtful." She said the last word the way someone would describe a pet that behaved but never impressed anyone. Grant rarely intervened. When he did, it was only to keep the peace. "Let it go." "Sloan, your brother works hard." Grandpa Jameson was the only one who pushed back. He would lean beside me after dinner and say, "Character lasts longer than charm." His voice never rose, but it always carried weight. That night, as Colton's insult lingered in the air, I felt those old words settle in my chest, quiet, steady, waiting for the moment they would matter. The week before the dinner, the shift began quietly. The family group chat lit up late on a Monday morning. Elena sent a long message outlining arrival times, dish assignments, seating, and a reminder that this year should feel more formal. She added a smiley face that felt more like a warning. Colton replied first. He sent a photo of himself on stage at a tech conference in San Francisco. His caption reading, "Keynote went flawlessly. Leadership looks good on us this year." Grant reacted with a single thumbs up. I typed, "I'll be there," and set my phone down. It buzzed again, almost immediately. A cousin wrote, "Did you hear Grandpa might announce who's taking over the Cannon Beach rentals? Everyone thinks it's Colton." Another message followed. "He's been talking a lot about legacy." I stared at the screen until the letters blurred. Later that week, Elena called. "Bring something simple. Sloan, we do not want the table feeling uneven." Her tone made it clear who the standard was. The next day, Colton's name appeared on my phone. "Do not mention work on Saturday," he said. "It will just complicate things. Tonight is important for me." "For you, I asked." He laughed softly. "Come on. You know Grandpa is choosing someone soon. Tradition favors the firstborn. And let's be honest, responsibility fits me better." I said nothing. Silence, in our family, always revealed more than words. By Friday night, tension had settled around me like a second skin. Each comment, each hint, each assumption formed a line that pointed unmistakably toward him. By the time I pulled into the driveway, the Mercer house was already crowded. Voices drifted through the windows, warm, loud, familiar in the way that used to make me feel included. Not anymore. Aunt Denise met me at the door with a soft smile. "Sloan, you look sweet," she said, brushing my arm gently. The word sweet always felt like a box someone was trying to tuck me into. Colton walked in behind me, shaking off the cold. "Colton, look at you," Uncle Mark said, clapping him on the back. "Sharp as ever. That leadership program is paying off." Colton grinned at me over his shoulder, a silent reminder of the hierarchy everyone else seemed committed to maintaining. In the kitchen, Elena lifted the foil on the dish he brought. "Beautiful presentation," she praised. When she turned to mine, her smile thinned. "Oh, this is simple." I set the dish down without responding. Grant passed through on his way to the living room. He gave my shoulder a light pat, never stopping, never looking up. It was the kind of gesture that meant everything and nothing at the same time. I followed them toward the dining room, each step heavier than the last. The night had barely started, but the old imbalance was already settling into place. Dinner began with the usual clatter of dishes and overlapping conversations, but underneath it all was a tightness I could feel in my ribs. Colton took his seat across from me, leaning back like he was settling onto a stage he owned. "So," he said loudly, "our keynote in San Francisco opened a lot of doors. People kept saying they could see the Mercer standard in me." He looked around the table, waiting for admiration he knew would come. Elena lifted her glass. "That is what leadership looks like," she said. "Some people are simply built to carry the family forward." Her gaze slid right past me. I tried joining my cousin's conversation about travel, but Colton cut across it with another story about negotiations he single-handedly steered. Grant let out a soft laugh, not because the story was funny, but because agreeing was easier than challenging him. Aunt Denise eventually turned to me. "Sloan, how is your project going?" "The renewable energy one," I answered quietly. "We finalized the blueprint last week, my team." Colton raised his voice. "Speaking of projects, I forgot to mention the partnership I secured after the conference. Huge deal. They said I had the presence of someone twice my age." The table shifted toward him again. Uncle Mark clapped. "That is our Colton." I set my fork down. My heartbeat stayed steady, but something inside me loosened like a rope pulled tight for too long, finally giving way. Grandpa Jameson looked down the table. His expression did not change, but his eyes tracked every interruption, every dismissal, every small cruelty that everyone else had learned to ignore. Elena held up her glass once more. "Some people are born for responsibility." Her voice carried just enough weight to make the implication unmistakable. Colton smirked and said, without looking at me, "Exactly." The room felt smaller then, as if it were slowly shaping itself around the version of the story they preferred, one where I stayed quiet, stayed small, stayed harmless. But for the first time, I did not shrink. I simply watched them, letting the truth settle where it needed to. Dessert plates had barely been cleared when Colton shifted in his chair, stretching his arms as if preparing for a performance. The room softened into a hush without anyone asking it to. Even the air seemed to hold still. He tapped his heel against the floor. "You know," he began, loud enough to cut through every lingering conversation. "Legacy only works when the right people carry it." Elena straightened. "Say what you mean," she encouraged softly, though her eyes were already locked on me. Colton leaned back, confidence dripping from every word. "Not everyone here deserves the Mercer name." His gaze slid to my face. "Some of us contribute. Some of us just exist." A murmur traveled down the table. My hands stayed still in my lap. He added, "Quiet does not equal capable. It definitely does not equal leadership." Grant rubbed the edge of his napkin but did not speak. His silence pressed harder than anything Colton said. I inhaled slowly. The pressure in my chest did not rise this time. It steadied. Colton's smile sharpened. "Honestly, Sloan, you are forgettable. We all know who actually represents this family." Aunt Denise flinched. Uncle Mark looked down, but no one challenged him. Elena nodded once. firm. He is right. Responsibility belongs to those who can elevate the Mercer legacy. Colton waited for my reaction, expecting the same shrinking he had seen his whole life. I gave him nothing. The stillness around me grew thicker, heavier, but it did not close in. It expanded, settling into a space inside me that he no longer had access to. Grandpa Jameson lifted his glass, held it for a long moment, then set it down with a soft tap that cut through the entire room. Conversations died instantly. Even Colton straightened, sensing a shift he had not planned for. Jameson pushed his chair back and stood. No rush, no theatrics, just the steady weight of a man who chose his moments with care. He looked at me first. His eyes softened just enough to steady the air inside my lungs. Then he turned to Colton. "You believe your sister does not deserve the Mercer name?" His voice was quiet, but it carried through the room like a line drawn in stone. Colton blinked, surprised but recovering quickly. "I am being honest. Grandpa, some people contribute. Some people do not." It is obvious who Jameson raised one hand. Colton fell silent mid-sentence. "Then neither do you." Gasps rippled around the table. Elena's hand flew to her chest. Grant's eyes closed, as if the truth had been waiting behind them for years. Colton stammered, "What are you talking about?" Jameson stepped closer to him. "I have spent the last year reviewing the reports from the Cannon Beach rentals. I found discrepancies, repairs billed twice, invoices that never matched, funds moved without proper documentation." Colton's face drained. "Those were strategic decisions? No," Jameson said, cutting him cleanly. "Those were shortcuts and lies." Elena stood halfway from her chair. "Jameson, he did not mean he did." Jameson replied, still calm. "And you encouraged him." His gaze shifted to Grant. "And you let it happen." Grant lowered his head. Jameson turned back to me. "I also spoke with Sloane's supervisor in Seattle. She told me Sloane has been the backbone of her team for years, managing crises without ever asking for recognition." My throat tightened, but I held still. Jameson exhaled slowly. "Legacy is not carried by the loudest voice. It is carried by the strongest character." Colton shook his head. "This is not fair." Jameson nodded once. "Fairness is finally catching up." He rested a hand on the back of my chair. "Sloane is the one I trust with the Mercer legacy moving forward." Colton's mouth opened, but no sound came out. The table sat frozen, the entire family suspended between who they had believed we were and who we had just become. Colton shoved back his chair so hard it scraped against the floor. "I am not listening to this," he muttered, voice cracking as he stormed down the hallway. Elena hurried after him. "Colton, wait, he did not mean it that way," she pleaded, her footsteps fading as they disappeared around the corner. Grant stayed behind, standing at the sink with his back to the room. He turned on the faucet and washed a plate that was already clean, scrubbing as if noise could drown out truth. Aunt Denise whispered, "Sloane, are you all right?" Her voice trembled, not from pity, but from finally seeing what had been in front of her for years. "I am fine," I said quietly, and I meant it. Something inside me had gone still in a way that felt new, steady, untouchable. Grandpa Jameson walked to my side and touched my arm lightly. "Step outside with me," he said. "There is more you need to hear." I rose from my chair, leaving behind the version of myself this family had always expected me to be. The night air outside was cold enough to sting, but beside Grandpa Jameson, it felt steady, real in a way the house behind us never had. He walked with slow, deliberate steps toward the dim string of lights stretched across the back fence. "I watched you tonight," he said. "You held yourself with more strength than anyone inside that room." I swallowed. I was just trying not to make things worse. "You cannot make worse what was already broken," he replied. His voice carried no bitterness, only certainty. "I waited to see each of you clearly. Character reveals itself when pressure rises. He turned to face me fully. The 3-unit property in Cannon Beach, the trust attached to it, the long-term decisions, those responsibilities belong to you now. I have already arranged the paperwork. My breath caught. You trust me with all of that. I trust you because you earned it, he said. Not through noise, through integrity. He rested a warm hand on my shoulder. They kept you small because it served them. But small was never who you were. The lights buzzed faintly overhead, behind us. The house felt distant, fading. Come inside when you are ready, he said gently. For the first time, I felt no rush. When I stepped back inside, the house felt strangely hollow. Colton's voice no longer echoed through the rooms, and Elena had not returned from chasing him. Grant stood near the counter, hands braced on the edge as if the truth had finally settled its weight on his shoulders. He looked at me for a brief moment, then looked away. It was the closest thing to an apology I had ever received. I grabbed my coat quietly. No one stopped me. Outside, the ferry lights shimmered across the water. I drove toward the terminal, the cold air slipping through the cracked window, sharp enough to keep me awake. For the first time in years, I did not replay the dinner in my mind, searching for the place where I went wrong. There was no wrong place. Not tonight. On the ferry ride back to Seattle, I leaned against the railing and let the waves settle my breath. Grandpa's words traveled with me, steady as the tide. You earned it, through integrity. Worthiness was never something they gave. It grew in the silence, in the choices, in the moments I refused to disappear. If any part of my story mirrors your own, stay with me. There is more to tell, and I think you may find your reflection in the chapters still ahead.